We're group number 9 in our Operations Management 4551 course. We are all Operation Management majors here at Baruch College, and we're all seniors as well. Before we start our presentation, we're just going to jump right into quick introductions. My name's Sebastian.
Adela.
My name's Andreas.
I'm Arusa.
My name is Farak.
And here we go.
The meat and bones of our case, we find it crucial that we give you some industry background. Our case was looking at the German industry, so this information is based on that specific country. The automobile industry is one of the dominating sectors because many economic activities rely on and are linked to the automobile production. As I'm sure you guys can imagine, when there is a making of a car, so many materials and different hands go into making of that car. So anywhere from the wood to the leather on the seats to the scrap metal and of course the tires. So a lot of it does go into it, which is why it's no surprise that's one of the biggest industries. Now, Germany is in fact the 4th largest in terms of total vehicle production. That's after US, China, and Japan. About 5 million employees depend on the success of the automobile industry, and that's when you take into account suppliers, car services, garages, and retails. So you could only see how big and important this industry is. And as the economy is moving in Germany, tire sales are witnessing a welcome revival thanks to the boom of the automobile industry. Of course, the more cars being made, the more tires that those cars are going to need. Now, advancements in technology have further augmented the growth of the German tire market. Of course, with technology comes disruption, whether for the good or bad, and in this case, it's doing the tire industry a lot of good. Now, some keywords that you guys need to know. This is more information that we just want to give you some quick knowledge that you guys could better follow along. And these 6 keywords we're going to use in practically all of our slides, so it's very important. Forecasting, so let's start with forecasting. Forecasting is the process of making predictions of the future based on past and present data through the analysis of trends. So what does that mean in simpler terms? It's just using present day data and as well as past data and trying to predict how your company is looking within the future days, weeks, months, or even years. Now, lead time. Lead time is the time between where an order is placed and when the order is delivered. So it's very important to know that as a company. And LASSO is actually a forecasting tool. It stands for Least Absolute Shrinking Selection Operator, and is very important to our case because it is what allowed us to do forecasting on our sales in this specific industry. And MAPE stands for Mean Absolute Percent Error. That just measures the error in your forecasting analysis, which of course, the bigger the MAPE, the more errors that you have, so you want your MAPE as small as possible. And exponential smoothing as well as the Delphi method are 2 other forecasting tools. However, in this specific case, they didn't really help too much, which my good friend Andreas is going to get into. But just for reference, exponential smoothing is a technique used for smoothing time series data using the exponential window function. And then the Delphi method is an interactive method where panelists come in. It's a panelist of experts, and they just give their opinions, answer questions, and through that gathered data, you make your forecasting analysis. Now, what's the critical issue in this case? The critical issue is that our forecasting our sales in this industry is close to impossible. It is actually extremely hard because so many economic factors go into the industry. It's very costly and there's a lot of expert biases. So let me give you an example of that. I'm an expert and I believe that labor costs are a very important indicator of our sales forecast, but Adela thinks that the GDP of Germany is a better indicator of our sales forecast. And so therefore, you're gonna have slightly different yielded forecasts, and so it's really comes down to who's more accurate, and it's almost impossible to really say, so there is, again, a lot of human error and biases. And unfortunately, typical forecasting methods like the Delphi method and the simple moving average method that I previously mentioned don't really help in this specific situation. Now, critical facts. This is just within the case itself, and it's important to know, and it deals specifically with the lead time. As I said, it's very important for companies to know that. In this case, the tactical planning horizon is of 12 months. Therefore, our sales forecast has to be parallel to that time span, and it has to be within those 12 months. Orders are placed 1 to 2 months in advance, but sometimes change 1 week prior. On the supply side, the procurement department requires raw materials to be ordered 4 to 6 months in advance, and an additional 3 to 4 months of delivery. So what we're looking at is really a total lead time of between 7 to 10 months, and that is a giant lead time. Anything can happen within that time frame. You know, demand could increase or decrease, something could go wrong with the delivery. Really, there's just so many factors that go into it that you can't really predict. And so now I'm going to pass it over to my good friend Andres, who's going to give you the operational implications of how it applies.
Thank you, Sebastian. Now, the main operations management problem in which all others stem from is sales forecasting. And as Sebastian said before, sales forecasting is the process of estimating future sales. Now, this is done by analyzing historical sales data, which is extracting sales data from the past to identify sales level, seasonality, and trends. Through the analysis of market trends, which is using macroeconomic indicators to identify when and why sales volumes will vary, and by using expert estimates, which are responsible for identifying indicators that affect company sales levels and make predictions based on their findings. Now, diving a little bit deeper into our problem, I'm going to talk about tactical sales forecasting, which is the use of macroeconomic indicators to aid in managing the supply chain. Now, when we're talking about supply chain, we're talking about inventory management, which is everything from the purchasing of raw materials to end product distribution. So now, our operations management problem is inaccurate, and the reason why it's inaccurate is because we have limited monthly sales history, which means that we're not able to go back into previous months and pull out that sales data to be able to forecast into the future. The use of univariate analysis, which is the use of one variable to forecast sales. Our operations management problem and case study are much more complex and require thousands of macroeconomic indicators to be taken into consideration. So the use of univariate analysis is unable to form like the complexity to the problem that we have. And lastly, human capacity and human bias. Now, humans are biased by nature, and they're unable to take so many external factors and put them into part of the solution. So that's why using humans, it's just inaccurate and unable to be projected and automated into the future. So now, to take a look at taking a look at our supply lead time schedule, we're able to understand how long it takes to place an order and how long it'll take for it to come in to present day. So as we can see, it requires 4 to 6 months for the ordering of raw materials, and then another 3 to 4 months for raw material order fulfillment. What this basically shows is that in order to receive inventory at the right time, the supply chain managers need to order 10 months in advance. Now, by shifting ourselves into the future with an accurate sales forecast of 9 to 12 months in advance, we are able to determine the most efficient quantity that will satisfy demand when we stand in present day. Now we can see why sales forecasting is so critical to the organization, because it is required to order the right quantity at the right time. So, 2 effects of inaccurate sales forecasts on the supply schedule. The first thing you see by an inaccurate sales forecast is overestimating sales, which leads to too much inventory, which leads to increased inefficiency. Now, that leads to the excess purchase of raw materials, excess tire production, and increased holding costs. This is not good for the company because at the end of the day, it leads to us having more expenses than we need. The second problem of inaccuracy in a sales forecast is underestimating sales, which means not enough inventory. Too little inventory to satisfy demand leads to loss of profit, dissatisfied customers, an invitation for competition, and an increased ordering cost, because if we don't have enough inventory, we're going to have to pay more to expedite shipments.
And now that I spoke to you about the operation management problems, I'm going to pass it on to Arusa, who's going to speak about how this company solved these operation management problems.
Thank you, Andreas. So I'm going to talk about how did they fix the issue. So the company had to first identify the root of their operations management issue and then resolve them from the base. One of the problems faced was in the sales department. The company broke down the elements in sales to figure out exactly which were the leading factors on the issue. After identifying the factors, they tried and tested them, which then they realized that time factor was also a part of why they were having issues in the operations management. The proposed solution was designing a framework that would identify key leading indicators and predict the sales that could happen. These would also generate better forecasts than macroeconomic indicators. The company also pointed out that as a big company, the variables were greater in their case and much was at stake. Therefore, these indicators would generate better forecasts separately and in different variables. They also had one eye on the future, looking into the long term, that these indicators would also generate forecasts for long-term purpose. The company had a technical planning of 1 year, therefore would forecast its sales over that horizon, but a lot of factors were involved in this case. The company sought to resolve the issues by adjusting the times in which the raw materials would be ordered, when orders would be placed or worked on and delivered. Another problem operations management had to fix was the decision making at the top level. The high experts could not solely rely on their judgment when it came to various issues, and the implementations of indicators would improve the decision-making process to be easier and less biased. It would also make it easier for the company to not have different judgments in the top-level management deck. They also implemented a new method, the Delphi method. Experts are not always accurate, and their information is not always feasible. Even though they might use indicators from the markets, the information accumulated would still not be as accurate in some cases, as it might even be biased. The Delphi method would be used to increase accuracy of these indicators and also eliminate any bias. After identifying the leading variable in the sales, the company operations management introduced lesser regression, which meant least absolute shrinkage selection operator. This enabled indicator to be factored in whilst making a sale forecast. This methodology they implemented allowed the company operations management to capture relevant seasonality, auto regressions, macroeconomics indicators, and their leading effects. Certain calculations could not be done with other methods, hence they introduced the lasso method. This method could calculate large number of variables by performing large number of selections. So the different methods operations management introduced certainly helped in fixing the issues they were having. The methods reduced human error and bias. They calculated much more accurate forecasts in sales and could work on long-term indicators too. They also prevented the uncertain decision making, which was prompt at top level in personal judgments and views. So now I would like to pass the turn to Farag. He's going to talk more about before and after comparison, and we're going to explain you more about the improvements. Thank you.
Thank you, Rusa. I will be talking about the comparison before implementing the lasso and what were the improvements after implementing the lasso model. So as explained before, forecasting is done up to a year in advance. The purchasing of input for the tire industry is based on the prediction of the sales for the upcoming year, and an inaccurate prediction of sales can lead to the loss of profit, and also holding an excess inventory can cause money to the company. So before implementing the lasso, the company was struggling to improve the accuracy of the tactical and strategical sales predictions for our major supplier in the tire industry. They were not sure what was the accurate amount of inventory they should produce for the sales. They were not successful implementing the accurate forecast. They were using the univariate method and expert judgment to predict the sales for the next year forecast. Human judgments were not able to consider the large external indicators that might affect the market changes, and human judgments are always biased. The company used different forecasting models to reduce the defects of prediction in sales for the upcoming year. They use 3 different types of models, which are company benchmark, linear regression, and lasso, least absolute shrinkage selection operators. As we can see, they find out the map over the different periods of the time map value. The map is mean absolute percentage error and measures error within the forecasting analysis. As we can see, the map value over the 12 consecutive months, and the lasso outperforms the 7 consecutive forecasting cycles, and it clearly shows the lasso outperforms better than as compared to other models. As we can see, the overall map value for 3 different models that they used was, for the company benchmark, it is 18.6, the linear regression, the overall is 20.3, and for the LESO is 15.3. The lower the map value, the better the forecast. So as the LESO has the lower map value, and this model is considered better as compared to other models. Now let's look at the improvements that were made after implementing the LESO model. So there was improvement and after the issue was solved. The improvements were in the accuracy of the calculations regarding sales forecast through the implementation of the LESO model, which targeted and weighted leading macroeconomic indicators at a much more accurate level as compared to the univariate method and human judgments that they were using before. Also, the company can now work with the long-term sales indicators as well as the short-term sales indicator through the automatic gain by using the LESO model. The tire industry could now accurately avoid any bias and also can avoid inaccuracy and can have a more accurate representation of what the microeconomics leading indicators are after the forecasting period. Now they can forecast better for the future periods because they have a LESO model. Now I would like to pass it to Adila, and she will tell more about what were our thoughts and takeaways from this case study. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Farah. Now I'm going to take you through our major thoughts and major takeaways from this case study. The case study gives us a very good insight of how important the forecasting errors are and the economic effect that they have on a business. An accurate forecasting is essential in any business, specifically for companies that require a large lead time in the production process. And we're not talking only about the tire industry that we have on the case, but it's applied in every kind of business. Regarding our case, though, the tire industry used an outdated forecasting method such as univariate analysis and human experts, which are inaccurate, they're biased, and they're not sustainable or efficient. Forecasting a year in advance requires a great amount of precision and the use of least absolute shrinkage selection operator regression, also known as LESO, and the automation of the selection of leading economic indicators led to a more precise and improved system, which would allow the company to increase the efficiency and the automation over the long term. But our major takeaways from the case is that massive importance of both selection and implementation of proper analytical tools. Also, the importance of implementing the automation within large companies will increase the efficiency and reduce the human error. Another major takeaway is the understanding and interconnectedness of sales forecasting and the demand planning process. Accurate sales forecasting leads to purchasing the right amount of inputs to produce according to the amount of the outputs. Inaccuracy in sales forecasting results in inefficiency throughout the supply chain and ultimately affects every aspect of a business. But the least major takeaway from the case is that we're going to continue to use the LESO method because we saw an increase on our forecast. The sales were proper, and this is not applied only in the tire industry. This is also applied in other industries. An example from a real life world, if we may say so, is, for example, a company for clothes. They need to forecast exactly prior 9 to 12 months because of the seasonality that they have, so that they don't have any stock in their warehouses, so the cost would not increase. And without further ado, we'll